During the Great Depression, families did not fear thieves alone. They feared banks collapsing overnight, neighbors turning desperate, governments freezing accounts, and authorities knocking without warning. Across Europe and beyond, people learned quickly that valuables were safest when they were invisible. Cash, gold, documents, heirlooms, and trade goods had to disappear into ordinary life. What follows are 10 proven survival methods families use to hide valuables inside their own homes, methods refined through scarcity, raids, confiscations, and social breakdown. These were not theories. They were practiced daily, and, well, many remain disturbingly relevant. Families hid valuables inside walls and structural voids that blended with the house itself. European homes built before and during the Depression often had thick plaster walls, timber framing, and hollow cavities created during renovations. Families would remove a single brick or wooden slat, slide valuables inside oilcloth or waxed fabric, and reseal the opening using the same dust and mortar scraped from the wall. The key was invisibility. No false doors, no markings, no metal containers that could be detected by sound. Modern application follows the same principle. A recessed wall cavity sealed with original materials, not modern panels or safes, remains one of the least suspected hiding methods during forced searches. Kitchen storage areas were used because no authority expected valuables near food and waste. Food scarcity defined the era, yet kitchens were paradoxically overlooked during searches. Families hid gold coins inside flour sacks, sugar tins, or sealed jars labeled as lard or preserves. Some wrapped valuables in parchment and buried them at the bottom of coal bins or ash buckets, knowing inspectors avoided soot and filth. Today, the same logic applies. High-traffic utility spaces filled with unpleasant materials remain psychologically ignored. The lesson is simple. The more ordinary and inconvenient the location, the safer the item. Floors and floorboards were modified subtly to conceal long-term assets. In many European homes, especially rural ones, wooden floorboards were not nailed permanently. Families memorized the sound and feel of specific boards that could be lifted silently. Valuables were wrapped tightly to avoid moisture and placed between joists, never directly on soil. Boards were reseated with worn nails to avoid fresh tool marks. Modern homes still offer this option in basements and raised floors. The historical rule still applies: never disturb more than one board, and never create patterns that suggest intentional access. Furniture was altered internally rather than used as obvious hiding places. Contrary to popular belief, families avoided hollowing out drawers or chair legs in obvious ways. Instead, they removed internal braces from wardrobes, armoires, and bedsteads, inserting valuables deep inside structural voids. These spaces were then resealed and reinforced so the furniture retained its original weight and sound. A piece that rattled was dangerous. Today, this method remains effective when modifications are invisible and irreversible without tools. The furniture must appear boring, heavy, and inconvenient to dismantle. Fireplaces and chimneys were used despite the risks because inspectors avoided them. Ash pits beneath hearths were common hiding places. Families sealed valuables inside ceramic or metal containers, buried beneath cold ash layers that were left undisturbed for months. Chimney flues were also used, with items secured behind loose bricks high enough to avoid heat. These areas were filthy, dangerous, and time-consuming to search. Modern equivalents exist in ventilation shafts and unused flues. The principle remains unchanged. Authorities rush clean spaces and avoid hazardous ones. Children's rooms concealed valuables because they were considered irrelevant. Families hid documents and small valuables inside toy boxes, dolls, book spines, and school satchels. Inspectors rarely searched children's belongings thoroughly, especially during periods of humanitarian oversight. Items were hidden inside sewn linings or false book covers placed among school texts. Today, the application is straightforward. Items hidden among low-value, emotionally neutral objects are often ignored even during detailed searches. Gardens and indoor plants, served as temporary but effective hiding locations. In urban Europe, families buried valuables in flower pots, beneath root balls, or inside sealed containers disguised as drainage stones. The goal was short-term concealment during raids or instability. Out in the countryside, rural families used fence posts, chicken coops, and shallow garden beds, carefully marking locations mentally rather than physically. Modern use, well, it requires the same discipline. No markers, no maps, and regular relocation. Soil is only safe when memory is precise. Clothing and textiles were modified to carry wealth invisibly. Women stitched gold coins into hems, corsets, and coat linings. Men hid folded currency inside hatbands and work belts. These items moved freely without suspicion and allowed families to evacuate quickly if necessary. Modern equivalents include concealed garment compartments, but the historical lesson here is restraint. Only portable essentials were hidden this way, never entire fortunes. Mobility was survival. Paper valuables were hidden in plain sight among worthless documents. Deeds, bonds, and identity papers got interwoven with old letters, church records, and expired permits. Families relied on, volume and boredom as their main defenses. Inspectors would skim through piles quickly, missing items that just looked mundane. Even today, the same tactic works, both digitally and physically. Important documents, honestly, survive best when they're buried among irrelevance, not set apart. Families would split their valuables across multiple locations to avoid total loss. No household ever kept everything in just one place. A portion stayed at home, another with trusted relatives, and another, that might be buried or concealed somewhere else. This kind of decentralization prevented catastrophic loss during confiscations or fires. Modern survival planning actually mirrors this exactly. Redundancy is not paranoia, it's historical precedent. The big, enduring lesson from the Great Depression isn't secrecy alone, but more like behavioral camouflage. The safest hiding place is one that doesn't change your routines, doesn't invite curiosity, and sure doesn't rely on clever mechanisms. If a hiding method feels impressive, honestly, it's already flawed. The families who survived the longest used dull, dirty, inconvenient spaces and trusted memory over markers. These principles, they still apply, whether you're protecting historical artifacts, emergency funds, or personal documents in unstable times. If this deep dive added real value to your understanding of survival history, I hope you'll support the work by subscribing to Warpaths of Europe. Go ahead and share this guide with fellow historians and preparedness-minded folks who care about real lessons, not just myths. History, rewards those who study it carefully, and survival has always belonged to those who paid attention.